Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. April 28th, 2004. Woodbridge, New Jersey. A young couple signs closing papers on a new townhouse. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, newly renovated kitchen. A move-up from their modest rental nearby. The kind of purchase that suggests stability, growth, a future. Bill Maguire smiles faintly in the photo snapped at the title company's office. Melanie, his wife, stands beside him in scrubs, white coat still on, her smile more reserved. That moment, frozen in a single JPEG, would later be scrutinized not for what it showed, but for what it concealed. Because 2 days later, only one of them would still be alive. And the house they bought together, no one ever moved in. William T. Maguire, known to most as Bill, was a 39-year-old Navy veteran and a senior programmer at a health software company. Reliable, steady, a bit intense. He loved routines. Friday dinners at Pizza Hut with the kids, Sunday drives, radio talk shows. He was also a man quietly desperate to save a marriage already off the rails. Melanie Lynn Maguire, 31, was a registered nurse at a fertility clinic in Morristown. Sharp, composed, the kind of professional who never missed a step on the floor. Co-workers described her as meticulous, private. A few noted she'd recently seemed distracted, spending long hours texting someone with a tight expression, but no one asked questions. Not in healthcare. You mind your lane. Their marriage had frayed over time. Financial tension, parenting disagreements, growing distance. But by spring 2004, friends said Bill appeared hopeful again, believing the new home in Woodbridge would represent a reset, only it didn't. Because on the night of April 28th, after celebrating their new home purchase, Bill vanished. No missing persons report was filed. Melanie didn't call 911. She didn't alert Bill's job, didn't ask his friends if they'd heard from him. In fact, when detectives would eventually question her, she said she assumed he needed space or had gone off gambling. She claimed they'd argued. She stayed with the kids. He left. That was that. But there were inconsistencies, not just in her tone, but in the timeline. Bill's car, a 2001 blue Nissan Maxima, was discovered a few days later in the Flamingo Motel parking lot in Atlantic City. The keys were still inside. His wallet was gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, just the unsettling neatness of a vehicle someone hadn't planned to return for. Local police noted the oddity, but didn't press it hard. Missing adults, especially ones with casino histories, don't set off alarm bells in New Jersey. Unless, of course, they start showing up dismembered. 12 days later, on May 5th, 2004, a fisherman spotted a dark green Kenneth Cole suitcase floating near the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel in Virginia, some 250 miles from Atlantic City. Inside were 2 human legs, severed at the thighs, wrapped in black garbage bags. The suitcase had no ID, but it hadn't been in the water long. Medical examiners noted precision cuts, clean, almost surgical, tissue trauma minimal. The body had been refrigerated, possibly frozen, then disposed of. Whoever did this had control and experience. Virginia Beach police opened a homicide file under John Doe, unknown male, white, approximately 40. They wouldn't remain uncertain for long. May 11th, a second suitcase surfaced. This one carried a head and torso. 2 gunshot wounds, one through the chest, one through the skull. Ballistics confirmed .38 caliber, wad cutter rounds. Unusual ammunition, typically used in controlled environments, by law enforcement, range shooters, or those familiar with clean ballistic trajectories. May 16th, the final suitcase. 2 arms, similarly dismembered, garbage bags again, zip ties, no signs of defensive wounds. The victim never fought back. Toxicology would later reveal chloral hydrate, a powerful sedative, in his system, enough to knock him unconscious before the shots were fired. Once the torso was examined, fingerprints provided the match. The victim was William T. Maguire of Woodbridge, New Jersey. At that point, Virginia and New Jersey law enforcement formally linked the homicide. What was once a presumed marital separation had just turned into an active interstate murder investigation. And as detectives reviewed financial records, surveillance logs, and vehicle toll passes, one name surfaced again and again, always just outside the frame, just outside the range of the camera, just out of clear reason. Melanie Maguire. The first suitcase came in with the tide. May 5th, 2004, Chesapeake Bay, Virginia. A local fisherman spotted a green Kenneth Cole rolling suitcase bobbing near the bridge tunnel span. He thought it might be luggage lost off a boat. He pulled it in. What he found wasn't clothes or gear. It was flesh, severed, pale, and wrapped in black trash bags. The suitcase contained 2 human legs detached cleanly at the femur, not torn, not hacked, precision cuts, surgical margins. By May 11th, a second suitcase surfaced, this time containing a male torso and a head. The body showed signs of post-mortem refrigeration, 2 gunshot wounds, one in the chest, one in the cranial vault. The entry wounds were clean, consistent with close-range fire using wad cutter .38 caliber ammunition. On May 16th, the third suitcase. 2 arms similarly severed and wrapped. No signs of resistance, no defensive wounds. But there were deep ligature marks on the wrists, and toxicology later confirmed. Chloral hydrate was present in the system, enough to sedate, paralyze, and prevent any fight. Virginia Beach Police opened a homicide case. 3 suitcases, 3 weeks, 1 body, no ID. But the fingerprints, once entered into AFS, matched a missing man out of New Jersey, William Maguire. At this point, the case shifted from a local homicide to an interstate murder investigation. The FBI flagged it, a body dumped across state lines involving controlled pharmaceuticals, unusual ammunition, and refrigeration. It wasn't sloppy, it was methodical. The suitcases became the first forensic anchor in the investigation. Kenneth Cole reaction line, manufactured in China, imported through a specific distribution chain, then narrowed by batch number and zip code to retail stores in northern New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Not a unique match, but tight enough to cross-reference with local purchases. Investigators canvassed retail receipts and loyalty card transactions. One store in Edison, New Jersey, showed a Kenneth Cole set, green, 3-piece, sold just weeks before the murder. Paid with a Visa card. Surveillance footage from the store was gone. The chain only retained footage for 14 days, and the case was already beyond that window. No tape, no face. But the digital receipt existed. When cross-checked against financial institutions, the card belonged to an account linked to Melanie Maguire. That finding wasn't proof, but it reframed the timeline. Bill was last seen April 28th. The suitcases were found in May. The luggage purchased in April. The buyer, his spouse. Still, detectives didn't move. They didn't confront. Not yet. Not without corroboration. Evidence analysis continued. The interior of the suitcases contained traces of carpet fiber, polyester blend, light beige. A match was later established with samples collected from a rental apartment previously occupied by Melanie Maguire. Not conclusive alone, but it meant the disposal process likely occurred in a controlled indoor space, not in a field or woods. Further trace examination showed biological transfer inside the suitcase lining. Microscopic epithelial cells, consistent with a closed environment decomposition process. There was no blood pooling, reinforcing the assumption that the dismemberment happened post-mortem and in a location with drainage access. Investigators made a key observation. All 3 suitcases used the same trash bag type, 13-gallon, black, unscented. Generic, yes, but the specific manufacturer printed microdate codes along the seams. That code batch was distributed exclusively to Walmart locations in New Jersey and central Pennsylvania. This allowed law enforcement to cross-reference purchase records again, focusing on credit card transactions tied to Melanie's known spending habits. 3 separate Walmart transactions appeared, one just 2 days before Bill's disappearance. Each included large quantities of trash bags, cleaning gloves, and bleach. The chain was tightening. Behind the scenes, state investigators were coordinating with federal forensics. The FBI's behavioral analysis team noted the logistics involved: refrigeration, dismemberment, chemical suppression, interstate transport. This wasn't a panicked kill. It was planned, timed, delivered. a detail that quietly bothered the lead investigator. There was nothing left to chance. That's what worried me. If someone had spent this much time cleaning up, they expected to walk away. Meanwhile, Virginia authorities continued mapping the current patterns from the suitcase locations. Using drift models, they calculated that the suitcases were dumped from a vehicle near the bridge access lane, likely between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the early hours of April 30th. That data aligned with an EZ Pass record from a known vehicle registered to the Maguire household. The timestamp? 3:37 a.m. Melanie later claimed she had no recollection of that trip. Forensic documentation tied the bags, suitcases, and timing into a single arc. 3 suitcases, all from the same retail supply chain, all loaded with body parts consistent in cut, wrap, and concealment. All thrown into the bay during a narrow 2-hour window by a vehicle that had no logical reason to be there, except to dump evidence. But the forensic puzzle wasn't complete yet. That would come next, with the discovery of microscopic evidence inside the victim's own vehicle. The Nissan Maxima sat in the Flamingo Motel parking lot, undisturbed for days. The ignition keys were inside, doors unlocked, nothing stolen, no visible blood. To an untrained eye, it looked like a car abandoned by a careless traveler. But for the team handling an active interstate homicide, it was more than suspicious. It was a controlled scene. The vehicle, registered to William Maguire, was located in Atlantic City less than 72 hours after he was last seen alive. He had no travel plans to the area and no gambling withdrawals in his accounts. No hotel bookings, no receipts. He had simply disappeared, and then his car appeared. That timeline alone placed the vehicle at the center of the case. The forensic team processed the interior. No blood spatter, no hair strands out of place. The carpets were vacuumed. The trunk, immaculately clean. That, in itself, was a red flag. One detail stood out: residual moisture in the trunk liner, with an unusually high level of chlorine derivative. Chemical swabbing confirmed it had been recently scrubbed with bleach or a similar agent. The fabric showed signs of saturation followed by fast drying, possibly with airflow or fans. They ran luminol. It lit up. The spray reacted around the trunk hinges and floor mat seams, tracing a faint outline consistent with liquid pooling. Not blood exactly, but enough to show that something had been there, removed and hastily cleaned. A forensic tech noted, "It wasn't messy, it was surgical. That's not normal." The dashboard revealed another clue, less visible but more telling. The car's odometer showed additional mileage not accounted for by regular use. Investigators mapped a potential route based on fuel levels and distance logged. The result? A drive from central New Jersey to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel and back, nearly exact to the mile. Even more critical was the residue collected from the driver's floor mat: fine particles of beige carpet fiber and a sliver of dark green synthetic material. These samples, when analyzed in the lab, matched precisely with the suitcase lining used to dispose of Williams' remains. Further analysis of the front seat yielded a short blonde hair, unrooted, undamaged, and consistent with the DNA profile of someone known to investigators. But the hair had no follicle, making it inadmissible for conclusive identification in court. Still, it told them someone had been in the car, recently, who did not belong there. Digital evidence supported the growing theory. Williams' toll account, managed via EZ Pass, showed an odd charge on April 30th, 3:37 a.m., at the Delaware Memorial Bridge Toll Plaza. He wasn't seen alive after April 28th. That toll event occurred while his phone was offline, his wallet unused, and his social activity ceased. The transaction aligned with suitcase dump estimates based on tidal drift calculations. In terms of logistics, it was a direct match. Someone drove that car out of state in the middle of the night, crossed into Virginia, and dumped 3 pieces of luggage off the bridge. Investigators pulled hotel logs from nearby motels during that window. No guest registered under Williams' name. No known aliases. Surveillance footage at the Flamingo Motel wasn't helpful. Cameras didn't cover the exact row where the Nissan was found. But staff recalled seeing the vehicle parked without movement for several days. It wasn't towed. It wasn't reported. No one checked in or out driving it. To detectives, the silence around that car was deafening. More testing followed. Inside the glove box was a purchase receipt from a Pennsylvania gun store. The item, a .38 caliber revolver. Cash payment. No serial number written on the receipt, but the store maintained a copy of the buyer's ID due to state regulation. That ID belonged to someone close to William, a person already being watched. The revolver had not yet been recovered. At this stage, the investigation had moved from theoretical connections to concrete alignments. Car mileage, cleaning agents, suitcase fiber, and toll records placed a singular timeline over the disposal. The person who drove that car on April 30th had knowledge of the body, access to tools for dismemberment, and awareness of how to hide digital footprints, except for the ones they didn't erase. One forensic investigator wrote in his report, "There were no mistakes, only patterns." In cases like this, you don't wait for confessions. You build cases around what objects say when people stop talking. As the lab reports solidified the timeline, a decision was made. Revisit the suspect's known residences, workplaces, and vehicles. Investigators were looking for one thing now: any residue, fiber, or biological evidence that could tie back to the victim or the crime scene. The break would come, not from a dramatic confrontation, but from a discarded couch. The search warrant for the Woodbridge rental wasn't issued on a hunch. It was structured, timed, and supported by forensic sequencing. Investigators weren't guessing. They had a pattern, and now they were chasing residue. The Maguires had vacated their previous apartment just days after closing on the new house. The lease termination came quickly. Melanie had reportedly moved back in with her parents, taking only essential items. But something caught the attention of detectives reviewing classified ad archives from early May 2004. A listing for a used couch, described as a beige sectional, in good condition, offered free to anyone willing to haul it. That couch was later traced to a local resident who responded to the ad and picked it up from a dumpster area behind the apartment building. He remembered the sofa because it was heavier than expected and had a musty odor. The cushions were stained. He'd left it in his garage for several days before deciding to throw it out entirely. Fortunately, it hadn't made it to landfill yet. The New Jersey forensic team recovered the couch and conducted an analysis of both the internal foam and upholstery. Under ultraviolet light, 2 areas on the undercarriage glowed with a pattern consistent with fluid saturation. Luminol confirmed the presence of human biological material. Later DNA tests matched it to William Maguire. This was the first time forensic analysts had recovered a physical object from a domestic setting that contained the victim's DNA. No trace was found in the apartment itself. The unit had been professionally cleaned, and no blood spatter or residual material remained on walls or floors. But the couch had been removed before that cleaning occurred. It hadn't been part of the sanitized scene. Investigators documented 3 primary findings from the furniture: trace blood and tissue fragments, embedded deep in the frame seam, consistent with passive flow rather than arterial spray. Blonde hair, consistent with previously collected samples found in the vehicle, this time with follicular root attached. Polyester fibers, beige, matching the carpet fragments found inside the suitcases. Lab analysts concluded that the couch had served as a temporary containment or staging surface, possibly during or immediately after dismemberment. The dimensions of the frame, as measured, were large enough to accommodate an adult male body in a seated or semi-reclined position. No cutting instruments were recovered from the scene, but minute serrated impressions on the wood beneath the upholstery suggested contact with a powered cutting tool. Further documentation connected the removal of the couch to Melanie Maguire. On May 3rd, local classified logs captured the free furniture listing tied to her email alias. The IP address linked directly to her known Verizon Fios account. The timestamp showed the post was made just 3 days after Williams' confirmed time of death. This data, paired with the couch's physical evidence, cemented an interior timeline. The staging, containment, and disposal preparation likely happened within that apartment before the suitcase drop-off, confirmed by toll records on April 30th. The body had been refrigerated or frozen, yes, but it had also been staged, and that stage was a piece of furniture offered to the public for free. The removal of the couch became a turning point in the investigation. Until then, all forensic data had existed in transit, in a car, in luggage, at a bridge. The couch was stationary. It existed inside the domestic sphere, an intimate object, once part of daily life, now a witness. One detail in the chain of custody report stood out. The couch cushions were missing. Only the base, frame, and partial backing remained. Investigators speculated the cushions were destroyed to eliminate fiber transfer or fluid evidence. But their absence added weight to a conclusion. This wasn't improvised. It was systematic removal of contamination. Forensic protocol called for the apartment complex's trash collection records. Waste management confirmed a special bulk pickup had occurred on May 4th. A receipt from the apartment's maintenance log noted a tenant disposed of sectional sofa and small dining table the previous day. The weight of evidence was growing, literally and legally. A few observers outside the case might have asked, why a couch? Why not a tarp or garbage bag? But investigators had a theory grounded in behavior, not convenience. In domestic homicides involving controlled environments, offenders often use familiar objects to manage unfamiliar tasks. A couch becomes a workspace, a buffer, a silent partner to a private act. And sometimes that object doesn't go quietly. By late May 2004, the DNA from the couch had been fully logged. A match to William Maguire's profile, fiber traces linked to the suitcases, the hair matched known associates of the victim's household, and the origin of the ad that gave it away, logged, time-stamped, confirmed. There was now a location, a timeline, and a tool documented in upholstery. By mid-May 2004, investigators had established a timeline. A body dismembered, staged, transported, and discarded with clinical precision. The physical trail was solid, but physical evidence alone doesn't always answer the deeper question. Premeditation. That's when they turned to the data. Melanie Maguire worked in a fertility clinic, a setting that required daily use of controlled substances. She had access to drug cabinets, prescription pads, and patient information systems. On May 20th, the investigative team submitted a formal subpoena to her employer's compliance office. The request, all logs associated with Melanie's login credentials over the previous 90 days. The logs revealed anomalies. In late April, Melanie had printed a prescription for chloral hydrate, a powerful sedative no longer commonly used in outpatient practice. The dosage requested was 500 milliliters in liquid form, an amount far beyond standard patient use. The entry was made under the name of a female patient, but investigators confirmed that patient had no medical record indicating a need for sedatives. She had never picked up the prescription. The prescription pad used was linked to Dr. Bradley Miller, a physician known to have a personal relationship with Melanie. When questioned later, Miller acknowledged the form was legitimate, but claimed he had not approved its use. It had been pre-signed, a shortcut not uncommon in fast-paced clinics, but one that carried legal risk. He hadn't noticed it was missing. The script was filled at a local pharmacy and picked up in person. Surveillance footage from the store had already been overwritten by the time police traced it, but the pharmacy clerk remembered the customer clearly. A woman in blue scrubs, calm, brief. She never returned. Investigators next turned to Melanie's internet activity. She denied any involvement with her husband's disappearance, but the browser didn't. A forensic image of her home computer revealed multiple deleted searches, later restored using standard data recovery software. Most of the queries were made in the 2 weeks before Bill went missing. They included how to make someone sleep fast without pain, undetectable poisons, how to disable a person, ways to sedate someone at home, can you buy a gun without license, Pennsylvania? The last one was notable. Melanie had, in fact, traveled to Pennsylvania in late April and purchased a .38 caliber revolver with wad cutter ammunition, the same type found in William's chest and skull. She used her maiden name and paid in cash. No permit was required at that location for the purchase, and the serial number had not been recorded on the receipt. This wasn't a single decision, it was a sequence. On May 23rd, the investigation team organized a timeline board inside the Middlesex County Task Force headquarters. Each digital record, each pharmacy transaction, each IP login was matched to a date, then to a physical action. Prescription, April 24th. Gun purchase, April 26th. House closing, April 28th. EZ pass, ping to Virginia, April 30th. Suitcases discovered, May 5th, 11:16. Couch removed, May 3rd. Furniture had posted May 4th. The pattern wasn't theoretical anymore. From a procedural standpoint, the digital trail had two key impacts. First, it revealed foresight. None of the actions taken by the suspect occurred in the aftermath of a fight or in the heat of panic. They were deliberate, spaced over days. The sedative, the weapon, the false prescription, the timing of a move, the staging of a public post to give away evidence. Second, it rebutted potential defenses. The act wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't self-defense. It wasn't reactionary. The evidence chain did not align with fear. It aligned with planning. And the planning came in two forms, offline and online. There's a tendency to view digital evidence as secondary, but in this case, it clarified motive where physical evidence could not. People clean up messes. They don't pre-order the mop. And when a person looks up how to make someone sleep without pain and then purchases a drug known for inducing unconsciousness, followed by a gun and a one-way route to a remote bridge, intent becomes visible. By early June 2004, the investigation had moved past the point of suspicion. At this stage, it was about precision. What prosecutors needed now wasn't another theory, it was continuity. The case had to transition from circumstantial to airtight. That meant the human element, actions, inconsistencies, and contradictions. And those would come from Melanie herself. From the outside, Melanie Maguire maintained control. She continued to report to work, paid her bills, took care of her two sons. She didn't break down. She didn't withdraw. She didn't ask where Bill was. And when she did speak publicly, she followed the same outline. She believed he left, that he was unstable, and that she had no idea what happened to him after the night of April 28th. But people who knew Bill didn't buy it. They described him as stable, a structured man, not someone who would abandon his children, walk away from a newly purchased home, or disappear without a trace. There had been tension in the marriage, yes, but not to the point of spontaneous flight, and certainly not to the point where he'd leave without a wallet, phone, or any contact. Co-workers at the fertility clinic began to quietly cooperate with investigators. Their interviews, logged and recorded, revealed a different picture of Melanie than the one she projected in press interviews. One staff member recalled that Melanie began asking specific questions in late April, questions unrelated to her medical duties. How long could medications remain stable after refrigeration? Could high doses of sleep agents cause vomiting? Another mentioned a shift in her temperament, more impatient, more isolated. Then there was the matter of the handwritten notes. Investigators recovered a yellow legal pad from Melanie's desk at work, turned over by a supervisor. Between appointment scribbles were fragments that didn't fit. Separate bag per piece, buy second phone, bleach, ammonia. Though incomplete, the notes were written in her handwriting and matched other samples collected during the case. Analysts later confirmed they were penned during a short period between April 24th and April 27th, the same window when she obtained chloral hydrate and bought a revolver. Melanie denied writing them, but she never reported them stolen or planted either. On June 2nd, detectives conducted a non-custodial interview with her at her attorney's office. They allowed her to recount the night of April 28th in her own words. She described an argument. She claimed Bill had pushed her. She said he left in a rage. She stayed home with the kids. That was the last time she saw him. But when asked how his car ended up in Atlantic City, she hesitated. Then she said something that surprised the room. She admitted she had driven it there. According to her, it was a prank. She claimed she took his car late at night, left it at the casino to make a point, and returned via cab. There was no cab receipt, no witness, no digital trail, just the claim. This moment changed the tone of the case. Until then, Melanie had denied all contact with the vehicle after Bill's disappearance. Now she was placing herself inside it. On the very night forensic data placed the car in motion toward Chesapeake Bay. The prosecution's internal memo from June 5th noted the shift. She moved the vehicle. That is now on record. Her presence overlaps with the evidence trail. This is no longer circumstantial, it's behavioral alignment. Beyond her statements, the small details added up. Inconsistent use of tenses when discussing Bill. Claims about a physical altercation that left no bruising. Changing stories about when she last saw him. a persistent theme of voluntary disappearance, without presenting any proof to support it. Even in private, to friends and coworkers, Melanie's language showed distancing. She referred to Bill in the past tense weeks before his death was confirmed. She spoke of adjusting to being a single parent long before anyone else assumed he was gone for good. Investigators flagged these shifts, not because they were dramatic, but because they weren't. In cases like this, absence of emotion isn't proof of guilt, but unexplained changes in narrative. Those matter. Ultimately, the cumulative inconsistencies, the contradictions in timeline, and the insertion of herself into the vehicle's movement formed a new layer: conscious adaptation. A person adjusting their account to match only what the investigators had already found. That was more telling than silence. June 2nd, 2005. Just over a year after William Maguire's dismembered remains were recovered from Chesapeake Bay, the investigation reached the point of no return. At 10:27 a.m., Melanie Maguire was arrested outside her office. No dramatic chase, no confrontation, just a plainclothes detective, a sealed warrant, and a silent hand on her shoulder. She was charged with first-degree murder. By that point, prosecutors had already spent months assembling the scaffolding of a case designed to withstand scrutiny. What made the Maguire investigation unique wasn't a confession or a single piece of irrefutable evidence. It was the accumulation of facts that, on their own, meant little, but together formed a structure too coherent to ignore. The prosecution's case was built on 5 pillars: motive, a strained marriage, an extramarital affair, and a desire to remove her husband without losing custody or financial control. Means access to sedatives, purchase of a .38 revolver, and clear digital searches related to disabling a person without trace. Opportunity, Melanie's known whereabouts, her direct access to the apartment, and her sudden unexplained solo trips after Bill's disappearance. Forensics, suitcase matches, carpet fibers, chloral hydrate in Bill's system, DNA on the discarded couch, and luminol traces in the car. Behavior, evolving statements, verifiable lies, and an admission that placed her in possession of the victim's vehicle at a critical time. The trial began in March 2007 at Middlesex County Superior Court. Jury selection alone took weeks. Media coverage was already saturated. Court security was increased. Opening arguments followed a simple theme: premeditated elimination. The prosecution led with physical evidence. They avoided overreaching. No speculative language. Just chain of custody, timestamps, itemized timelines, and confirmed connections. Every suitcase, every receipt, every toll booth crossing, every click in the browser history. They presented easy pass records showing the Maguire family car traveled across the Delaware Memorial Bridge during the early hours of April 30th, matching both the dumping timeline and Melanie's now admitted trip. They introduced Walmart receipts linked to cleaning supplies and trash bags bought on her account. They brought in forensic pathologists to explain the chloral hydrate in Bill's bloodstream. The dosage wasn't survivable. The sedation was deep. He didn't fight because he couldn't. And they walked the jury through the .38 caliber wounds, 2 shots, not one, both at close range. Melanie's defense took a different route: doubt. They emphasized the lack of direct witnesses, no blood at the apartment, no murder weapon recovered, no DNA placing her at the bridge. They suggested the possibility of another actor, perhaps even a third party unknown to both the state and the public. They challenged motive by portraying Bill as emotionally volatile and controlling. But the problem wasn't just what the defense could improve. It was what Melanie had already said. Under cross-examination, the state replayed Melanie's own words, statements she made to police, in public, and under oath. Each contradiction was highlighted against the backdrop of new evidence: her evolving claim about moving the car, her vague answers about prescription logs, her inability to account for key dates. Even her tone worked against her: measured, restrained, sometimes defensive. Jurors were instructed not to read into that, but people notice. A critical moment came during the testimony of the digital forensic examiner. He laid out Melanie's search history on a screen. How to make someone disappear: NJ gun laws, no ID. How to kill with poison, no smell. No one in the courtroom spoke. No embellishment from the prosecution. The screen said enough. After 6 weeks of testimony, 80 witnesses, and over 250 exhibits, the case was handed to the jury. Deliberation lasted 4 days. On April 23, 2007, Melanie Maguire was found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, desecration of human remains, and hindering apprehension. The sentence followed in July. Life in prison with no possibility of parole before 66 years served. What made this case resonate wasn't the brutality, it was the clarity. The evidence didn't shout, it accumulated, piece by piece in documents, fiber threads, digital footprints, and the absence of any other credible explanation. And for prosecutors, the conviction was a statement that in the absence of a witness or confession, evidence still speaks. On July 19, 2007, Melanie Maguire stood before a New Jersey judge and received her sentence: life in prison with no possibility of parole for 66 years. That wasn't a symbolic figure. Under state law, it meant she would be eligible for release no earlier than the year 2073, when she would be 100 years old. She was processed into the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women, a medium-security prison in Hunterdon County, New Jersey. There were no cameras rolling, no dramatic statements. She maintained the same position she had since her arrest: not guilty. For many, it should have ended there. But high-profile cases don't always conclude with a verdict. In the weeks following her conviction, the story of the suitcase murder remained on front pages. Not because of lingering legal ambiguity, but because of its calculated nature. The crime hadn't been a spontaneous explosion of rage. It had been staged, dismembered, disposed of in parts, and the person held responsible had been a mother, a nurse, a woman without a violent past. The contrast disturbed people. Television specials aired, Dateline 48 Hours, and several national outlets covered the trial in depth. The public consumed transcripts, debated the strength of circumstantial evidence, questioned the psychological profile, and asked whether a person could be guilty without being visibly unstable. What lingered wasn't just the crime, it was the method. Meanwhile, the fallout rippled in quiet places. William Maguire's family, especially his sister and parents, declined most interviews. They had custody of the couple's 2 sons, then just toddlers. The children were told their father died. For years, no further explanation was offered. In a civil action following the conviction, Melanie's parental rights were terminated. Her name was removed from school records. Birthday cards sent from prison were never passed on. What justice did not restore, time couldn't either. The boys were raised without either parent. Melanie filed her first appeal in 2011, alleging ineffective counsel and improperly admitted evidence. The court denied her motion, citing the overwhelming convergence of physical, digital, and behavioral elements that supported the jury's finding. A second appeal in 2014 focused on her polygraph being excluded, but it was again dismissed. No new trial was granted. Still, she maintained her innocence. In a prison interview aired in 2020, Melanie said she believed her case had been mishandled, that evidence had been misunderstood or ignored. But she provided no alternate theory, no explanation for the chloral hydrate, the suitcase purchases, the EZ Pass records, the lies, the inconsistencies. Her argument was not one of proof, it was of belief. The Maguire case would go on to be taught in several criminal justice programs, not for its brutality, but for its structure. It became a study in cumulative prosecution, how small details, when consistent and unchallenged, can convict without a smoking gun. The fibers, the timestamps, the way a suspect reacts before knowing what the police have found. For law enforcement, it reinforced the value of patient investigation. For legal scholars, it prompted debates on premeditation and forensic threshold. For families, it was a reminder that violence rarely looks like the movies. 15 years after the conviction, the bridge from which the suitcases were thrown still stands. Commuters pass it every day, unaware of what happened beneath. The apartment where Bill was likely killed has long since been repainted and re-rented. The couch is gone. The car has been resold. The case files are boxed and sealed in evidence storage. But records remain, as they should. There's a reason this case continues to resonate. It wasn't just about a marriage that broke. It was about what people do when they think they can orchestrate every variable, when control becomes more important than consequence. And it's a warning, because if someone close to you suddenly disappears, and their car is left behind, and their phone is off, and their story keeps changing, you can't afford to dismiss it as a bad week or a private issue. Sometimes that silence is manufactured, and by the time you realize it, the suitcases are already gone. Looking back, I still ask myself, how could someone plan something so precise, yet so inhuman? What I've learned is that evil doesn't always look like a stranger. Sometimes it wears the face of someone we trust. If this case taught me anything, it's to never ignore red flags just because they come from familiar hands. Listen to your instincts, speak up early, and when something doesn't feel right, don't wait until it's too late. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were in Bill's place, or Melanie's neighbor or coworker? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's talk about how we recognize danger before it's masked as normal. If this video hit you in any way, if it made you think, reflect, or even just pause, let me know where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like it, tell me why. Your feedback matters here. And don't forget, if you want more true stories that dig deep and stay honest, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep learning together.